Hello everyone and welcome to Fashion History Class 1. Today we're not starting with designers, trends or runways, we're starting with a palace. When most people think of Versailles, they think of excess, gold, extravagance, but Versailles was way more than a royal residence, it was a fashion system. At Versailles, fashion was not just about personal style, it was about control, visibility, economics. And by the end of the video, you'll see how many actual fashion practices actually began there. So, what is a fashion system? A fashion system is not just about clothing, it includes someone who sets tastes, rules about who can wear what, trend cycles, production, labor, and money, and fashion as a form of communication. Today we think about designers and brands, but in the 17th century it was all centered around one man, Louis XIV. Louis XIV ruled France for over 70 years, and he understood something fundamental: appearance is authority. At his coronation in 1654, Louis XIV wore a mantle of deep blue velvet embroidered with gold fleur-de-lis. This was not a fashion choice, it was a political statement. Blue was the traditional color of the French monarchy, associated with divine protection and secret kingship. The gold fleur-de-lis represented legitimacy, continuity, and the idea that the king ruled by divine rights. And the materials also communicate power. For instance, velvets require a lot of labor and expense. And the gold embroidery signal access to wealth, artisans, and time. So anyone looking at the king immediately understood his supremacy before he even spoke. And the king extended his visual authority into everyday dress. He famously wore red-heeled shoes. It was a color restricted to him and those he favored. Red dye was costly, and so the red was a visible signal of proximity to royal power. And even his hair became part of the system by popularizing long wigs. Louis XIV made appearance, not nature, a true marker of authority. So Louis XIV was not just ruling France, he was designing an image of absolute power. So Versailles was a system of power. It was designed to be overwhelming, and that was intentional. Nobles were required to live at court where they were always visible, and clothing became a way to monitor rank and loyalty. And strict dress codes governed the court life. Only certain ranks were allowed to wear gold or silver embroidery, diamonds, specific type of lace like Venetian lace, or certain colors made with certain dyes like crimson or royal blue. If a noble dressed too simply, then they could appear insignificant, but if they dressed above their rank, then they could risk being ridiculed or excluded. And so fashion worked as a visual hierarchy. Without anyone speaking, you could tell who mattered and who did not. Fashion at Versailles was deliberately excessive and extremely expensive. Courtiers were expected to change outfits multiple times a day: morning dress, court appearances, evening wear, and special ceremonial outfits. Repeating outfits was considered socially dangerous and suggested a loss of status or royal favor. And this constant need for new garments pushed nobles into debt. Many spent far more for their clothing than for their estates, making them financially dependent on the king. At the same time, Louis XIV encouraged French luxury industries. Under his finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, France invested heavily in silk production in Lyon, lace making industries, the Gobelin manufactory for textiles and tapestries. So Versailles did not just consume fashion, it also created an entire luxury economy. At Versailles, fashion was inseparable from daily rituals. One of the most famous examples is the lever, the king's waking up ceremony. Dressing the king was part of this event, and only nobles from certain ranks were allowed to participate. Even handing the king a shirt was a honor tied to status. Women at court were required to wear the grand habit, a highly structured dress with a stiff bodice, wide panier skirts, and heavy silk fabrics. These garments restricted movements, forcing wearers to adopt controlled, elegant movements. Clothing dictated how you stood, walked, and interacted. At court, clothing spoke before people did. Silhouettes indicated rank. Wider skirts, larger sleeves, and heavier fabrics meant higher status. Materials also carried meaning. Silk signaled wealth, lace signaled leisure, embroidery signaled access to labor. Accessories like gloves, fan, jewels communicated gender, power, and political allegiance. Versailles also introduced the idea that fashion changes constantly. Louis XIV intentionally shifted styles. Sleeves widened, coats loosened, decorations became more elaborate. One key example is the juste au corps, a long fitted coat worn by men at court. These garments eventually evolved into the modern men's suits. Trends spread beyond Versailles through painted portraits, written descriptions, and fashion dolls called Pandoras, which were sent across Europe dressed in the latest court styles. Versailles shows us that fashion has always been about more than just the clothing. It's about power and visibility, control and hierarchy, performance and image, economics and labor, modern fashion systems, designers, influencers, fashion weeks, luxury brandings are direct descendants of what started in Versailles. And understanding Versailles helps us to understand why fashion still works the way it does today. In our next class, I want to focus on a fashion icon which defined court style at the time, Marie Antoinette. So if that's something that interests you or you want to learn more about culture in general, please follow me. I post one video a week every Sunday. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you next week in a new video. Bye!